All right, thank you, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We're here for the January meeting of the Assembly Infrastructure Enterprise and Utility Oversight Committee of the Whole. We're noticed today from 11:15 to 12:15 p.m. And I will just start by saying that we have a very packed agenda, so I appreciate everybody keeping us moving along. With that, let's go ahead and start with member introductions. In the room we have
Felix Vera.
Anna Brawley.
Zach Johnson.
Erin Baldwin Day.
And on the phone, I see Ms. Silvers.
Hello,
Thank you.
Yara Silvers.
Perfect. Any other assembly members on the phone? Doesn't look like it. So I also am going to just mention to try and make sure that we're utilizing our time in the best way possible. We're going to move the agenda around a little bit, and we're going to take the SWS update from the ARL closure fund, and we're going to move that to the bottom of the agenda. So with that change, we have two presentations from AWU. Take it away, please. I'm sorry, quickly, I just got a note from one of the members on the phone that I guess they're not hearing you. Might need to move the microphone just a little bit closer to your mouth. And then while we're in this quick pause, I'll note member Martinez joined us on the phone at 11:17.
Is this better? Can you hear me better?
It sounds like it's better now. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right. So the current system was not designed to be mobile friendly. It wasn't a hot item at the time. How many of you had issues with resetting your passwords? Have anybody had difficulties with that, or auto pay, setting up auto pay? Right. So customers are getting frustrated. You're one of many of our customers that contact us and wanting assistance with those functionalities. So also with that, we are limited on self-service functionality, so we don't really have any kind of SMS text function with this current system today. So you guys are get to see the first look of our updated system. So here, you can see it's a fresh, modern look. It's simple. It's more intuitive for our customers, and it's easier to understand with the account summary. And it does build on current technology that prepares us for the future. And the biggest thing that we're really excited about is the SMS notification functionality. And here you can look, this is the customer's dashboard. You can see that you can look at the account activity. You can quickly see the customer might have paperless billing, but they're not set up on auto pay, so they can quickly see that on the dashboard, the amount they owe. And they have quick links to get to wherever they need to go to navigate to either their bill history or their payment history. So there's a one-stop shop for our customers, so they don't have to dive in to figure out where they want to go. And I wanted to highlight a little bit about the mobile-friendly SMS features. One of the great things, I mean, how many would you like, if you have a payment reminder, you can get a text message that lets you know that your payment is due, and you have a quick link that you can just select from your cell phone, and you can just make a one-time payment from that feature. So one-time payments could be quick and easy right from your cell device. You can also get set up reminders where you can get reminders from on your cell phone as well as your email notifications. And then, go ahead. And then easy use on smartphones and tablets that includes Android operating in the Apple iOS phones as well. And the great thing is that all messages are managed by AWU to ensure reliable and consistent customer messaging. All right. Is it better?
Sounds better.
All right. Do I need to repeat any of that or am I good? Okay, got it. So just to expand a little bit more on self-service and account features, again, it's just very quick and easy access to view bills, bill payment history. It's really easy to set up the reoccurring payments where right now it's a little bit more cumbersome for our customers to do that. And if they don't want to set up a profile, they can easily make a one-time payment. Here, I just provide a sample of a bill where they can just easily select pay now and they can make a one-time payment right there from the bill image. And then overall, customer experience really matters to us. We are very proactive with our communication. Some of you, if not already, you will start receiving letters from us. You'll start getting emails and postcards preparing you for this upcoming change. We want to make sure that you understand what's coming, and it's easier for you guys to get either re-register your services or you're a new customer just signing up for services. So we're going to make sure you have all the available information that you need to be successful at setting up your profile. And our messages is clear, it's customer focused, and our goal is to reduce as much confusion as possible. And our staff are super excited about this upgrade. It's really going to help alleviate some of those frustrations from our customers. And just a little bit of quote, ARU embraces change and we are leading future. The world is shifting and those who adapt and innovate will be the ones to lead the way. So any questions at all?
Yeah, I think I have one from Member Rivera.
Yeah, so I've never had a pleasure of being a customer, primarily because I'm a renter, and so my landlord's always been the customer. Mm-hmm. So question on sort of a red flag for me was the SMS. And in particular, I'm curious about IT security issues. So how was that investigated? What precautions have you taken to make sure that that's not potential for scam or frauds?
Absolutely, and we are definitely it's definitely secured. It is a feature that customer has to sign up for. So there's an opt-in piece of that, as well as they have to confirm that that is something they would like to sign up for. And then once they opt in, the customer will need to go in and set up those notification preferences to get those text messages. Because with SMS, there is a cost to the customer. Could potentially be cost, not depending on their plan. So they have to understand there might be potential fees associated to signing up for those functionalities. But I can assure you that the IT perspective will definitely be very secured.
All right, Member Brawley.
Yeah, thank you for working to make this easier for customers. My question is, just to confirm, if I remember correctly, there are not fees, for example, for paying online. Does this add any additional kind of service fees for customers?
No, there's no additional fees to have to sign up for services, as well as the payment option. So there would not be any additional fees.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, and I know systems like this do have a cost, but also thank you for not doing what many in the private sector do, which is nickel and dime customers. So thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Going to move on to our next presentation from AWU. I'll just know it looks like it is a fairly long one, but we've only got about 10 minutes for this, so I'm going to ask that we try to keep things moving at a brisk clip.
And joining us to this presentation is Todd Carroll, our Capital Program Manager at AWU.
Hi, I'm Todd Carroll. As was stated, I've been with the utility since 2001, been a resident since 1982, so I'm very proud of the utility and everything about Anchorage, and happy to present on this. Just an overview of the plan, and
Can you open this? It's not showing up.
oh, sorry, let's see. Where are we? How do we do it? We just show. Isn't the other one just up? That's weird.
Can you help us get the slideshow?
No, I don't know why that's not mirroring, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Let's do this guy. Oh.
Second screen. Okay, sorry about that. Anyway, so water master planning is an event we try and do every 7 to 10 years. And so the purpose of the plan, supporting efficient, effective operation throughout the city for the water distribution system. We also do a sewer master plan, but I'm not presenting on that today. So one of the intents is so that we have an orderly capital improvement program that looks at the drivers throughout the community and changes that are going on. I'll speak to that in a minute so that we can have an orderly progression and proactive investment in our infrastructure. So our current system, just a quick overview on that. We have approximately 55,000 water customers in the certificated area, 2 water treatment plants, several wells that are in operation, 850 miles of pipe, lots of hydrants, several reservoirs. Our average demand throughout the year is 23 million gallons. In the summer, we usually have our peak demand. Over time, it's actually dropped a little bit to that number. Back a decade and 2 ago, we had some higher demand. It's moderated a bit. So as I was speaking to, some of the drivers we look at when we're doing plans, population, demand, the system as a whole. Basically, what we're looking at is a pretty stable population, slow growth. We have a good system. We had an external consultant that we used to review all this and help us with the plan. And they said, the utility is looking pretty good with our infrastructure and the way we've responded to the level of service it needs. Development wise, those are other planning drivers and regulations. We all have seen the rising costs. And so we're responding, as the community develops just in time, a little bit smaller scale than we might have back in the 80s during the high expansion times. Regulations, changes with that, of course, some of the new things, PFAS, lead and copper rule considerations. Those are all things that we took and incorporated into thoughts in the plan and how we react in the future about demand and supply and making sure that we have safe, effective delivery of our drinking water. And of course, where we get the funding for all the projects moving forward with a lot of competition for the funds. So,
I'm sorry, I think on that slide, we had a question from Chair Baldwin Day.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Carroll, I'm curious, when you're looking at this planning period, are you also considering under this development, are you looking at housing development specifically with that, or is that housing development and commercial development? What does that actually mean?
We look at the whole certificated area and where the transmission system needs to be, and if it's already there, maybe there's some infill where some interconnections haven't been made. But in general, it's the whole system for what you might want to call an idealized system to make sure we're out in front or know what might be coming, not just what's being built today.
Gotcha. And so this particular master plan anticipates potentially adding to our housing stock over the next 10 to 15 years, potentially?
Yeah, we looked at many of the other plans in the community, including the housing initiative and how that would affect the system. And in general, we would believe we're well suited for it.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. So on that note, with demand, we actually are seeing on the gray line, which is right below the 50 there, that it is tapering a bit based on projections over time. But even with a 1% growth in demand or population as it may be, we are still well suited to stay below the blue line of our water production firm capacity of 60 million gallons. So we're looking pretty good for the next 20 years. Proposed projects, therefore, a lot of it's about rehab and replacement. The infrastructure's aging. A lot of the infrastructure and focus in the past was on corrosion, ductile iron pipe, some of the other things we had buried infrastructure. A lot more of that transition spent to facilities, aging facilities, pumps, plants, and all those things. We have maps that will be published with the plan that shows that we have work all throughout the community in every area over the 20-year term. And that all the way from Eklutna to Girdwood. So on top of that, we look at capacity improvements to the question that was asked. So like specifically meeting peak demand in Girdwood, we're looking at doing some improvements there for some of the developments that are happening and are planned to happen, as well as Eagle River and a new reservoir supporting future development opportunities, being right-sized and right-timed. System optimization, that's more of an in-house look at how the hydraulic modeling says our water is moving around effectively where, and water age, water quality aspects. So several projects there, pressure zone consolidations and interties, like I've discussed to a certain degree. And so the projects on these slides are more focused on that aspect of what the projects look like in the future and will be published with the final plan. As far as schedule, we're basically wrapping up. This is the last month before the final plan is published. We have met with a lot of user groups and had some really good feedback and input, and we're continuing to communicate with groups like AMATS, PM&E, and others. We have another presentation today with them. And then we'll be wrapping up and publishing the plan. Most of the comments have not really moved the needle on what we're talking about today, but it's been good input, including internally, of course. So the next steps, like I said, is publishing the plan, hoping February to have that out.
Great, thank you. Member Brawley.
Yeah, I have a few questions and I'll try to keep them brief. First, high level, I understand that to expand the system is not something that AWU's current ratepayer money can be used for. So where, just generally, where does the capital money for these come from? Is it part of the rates? Is it grants? Just, and I know it depends on the project, but just curious how we pay for these things.
Certainly, through the chair, David Persinger, general manager. Generally, it's a blend of equity, which is return on our investment through our rates, as well as money that we borrow primarily through the state revolving fund through DEC, either clean water funds on the wastewater side or drinking water funds on the water side. When it comes to development inspection, you're right, we have significant challenges in that aspect as a regulated utility. However, we have spent a lot of time over the last several years, been successful at securing quite a bit of federal funding and some state funding that is helping. And we've tried to focus those funds on areas where we have development, for example, Powder Reserve that's on the wastewater side that we have a large grant for, but there's work over in Sand Lake area for water and sewer and ongoing, there's work in Girdwood as well. So a lot of that grant funding we're trying to use in areas where we struggle as a utility because of the parameters we have to operate in.
Thanks. Yeah, and I think this would be a request for the future is to maybe do a little bit more of a deep dive on the mechanics of that, because I know we've gotten questions as we talk about the budget and kind of what it can and can't be used for. So that's a conversation for another time. Specific on the airport project. So I was looking at the map. It's and I appreciate the system optimization because it's a bunch of loops, right? So making sure those loops work. It said it was 10 or 15 years out, but I'm curious. And this is the Ted Stevens Airport. It's on airport property. Obviously, it's our pipes. It seems. Does the state contribute at all to those kinds of projects on their property? Because it's obviously our utility, but their facility. Curious about that.
That's through the chair, that's an interesting question. Depends on the scenario. So the airport, for example, is a large private system that's operated by the state or their renters out there because they have all the infrastructure out there. I believe the pipeline you're speaking of is the main one that goes across the runway, and the north-south runways also feeds the Aspen wastewater treatment facility, which is, by the way, our largest water customer in the municipality. That pipeline, I believe, is through an easement under there, but we're always cognizant of plans that the airport has when they're doing work out there and try to coordinate with them to make sure that they understand we have critical assets there. But ultimately, intertie around that either to the Kincaid side or around the north side of the airport would be advantageous, and it's in our long range planning.
Okay, thanks. And just for clarity, we don't have to go back, but I was looking at slide 16. There's this project 1129 that has a pink pipeline. My last quick question is actually, it's not on this specific topic, but can you give us a rough timeline for when the proposed rate increases might be moving through RCA? Because I know we did our part of that process, but just curious. I know we've also gotten questions about that.
Yes, through the chair. So our rate increase revenue requirement study was submitted to the RCA on December 30th. Public notice for that ended, I believe, yesterday at close of business with the state yesterday. And I believe the commission has until February 13th. On February 13th, they will either issue an interim order, give us interim and refundable rates. They could deny it altogether, or they could bless it as is and put them in as permanent.
Thank you.
So February 13th is when customers, or shortly thereafter, will start seeing that on there.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you guys. Let's go ahead and queue up the PAMP update, please.
So I was talking to Dylan from last little bit. Probably heard with the electrical substation, the GDP, it was not unanimous for that, so that was the objection. So Dylan mentioned that so he wants to ask him if why to go to the way they did and what their concerns are. He's available for that. But
Is that something you want to correct?
I don't know. I guess I'm kind of curious to see how Terry and Eric, sort of frame the conversation around that. He also mentioned he's had to meet with people, offline as well.
Sure.
When you're ready.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Adams, Jacobs Program Manager, supporting the Port of Alaska and Moody and delivering the Port Danyang Port of Alaska Modernization Program. Here today to talk about a couple items we'll walk through and then entertain any members' questions that you guys have. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Now, where's the? There we go. So the agenda, we'll talk about the North Extension Helipad Project, electrical substation site selection approval, and electrical substation change order authority increase request that you guys will be seeing on the January 27th, 23rd assembly. We're trying to get that into on base this afternoon. First off, the North Extension Helipad Project. The purpose is to relieve existing space constraints on the port for military mobilizations. Consists of a helipad and access road, and this will be paid for with excess NES1 grant funding. So when I talk about that, if you guys are aware, the 2022 $68.7 million grant we got from MIRAD, the remaining funds on that will cover this approximately $3.6 million project. And so that's where the excess funds are going. We met with the Port Advisory Board on 12/30, and everybody was in favor of adding this project to the PAMP program. And so if we request the assembly vote on it at the next assembly, and we'll kick that off and get going. Just to clarify, this will be 100% reimbursed by the PIDP grant. The area that's currently used by the military for equipment mobilization is going to become very congested in 2026 When Terminal 1 construction begins, this project should be constructed as quickly as possible to alleviate the congestion. And so we're looking at doing construction in summer of 2026. I mentioned this was all in favor at the PAB vote that we had on 12/30. Any questions on the helipad? And I believe that AM is number 29 in your system right now. So, okay, electrical
Oh,
sub.
I'm sorry, quickly, we have a question from Member Brawley.
Yeah, sorry. Just curious if the kind of improvements to that, sorry, so this does not exist now, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, how much traffic do we anticipate kind of coming through? Is this occasional, or is this gonna be like if for, like, at Lake Hood, for example, different, different type of, air vehicle, I guess, but we see, as new operators move in, there's an increase of the number of planes, so I'm just curious what we would expect over in this area in terms of helicopters.
Through the chair, Member Brawley, that's a great question. This is right now the areas out in front of the new admin building. Those items are used by the military for deployments. Is they land anywhere from 2 to 4 times a year, land the helicopters there, and then load them on the ships for deployment. This would allow for this to be built and those 2 to 4 continue without impacting construction, would free up yard space for other uses by vendors that may want to rent the space in the future. But there's probably anywhere from 2 to 4 times a year that they'll be landing on this.
And not anticipating very much of an increase in the short term.
Yeah, I guess my question would be if there's any plans to also kind of lease use of that helipad to other operators. I mean, maybe that's speculative now, but that's the only
Yeah,
thing.
speculative is a great word for it. Certainly we'll be looking at it, but we don't have plans to increase the traffic out there for this program at this time.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and I know that would certainly generate discussion if that comes to pass. Thanks.
All right, Chair Baldwin Day.
One
question
more.
as well.
Sorry, through the chair, Member Brawley, there is discussions that when this is not in use by the military, that it will be available for lease for other vendors, not necessarily airplanes, but people to store containers out there or other things like that. So those two.
Yeah, my question is about the excess grant funding you mentioned that's available. I caught 2022 16.1 million in totality from what source?
Through the chair, Member Baldwin Day, great question. Fiscal year 2022, the port applied for a port infrastructure development grant for the NES1 project that just finished up this year. At that time, we were awarded the port was awarded the largest MARAD grant underneath that at 68.7. The bids come in just slightly under that, and so we have excess grant funds available to use to pay for this $3.8 million project.
And because I am still trying to catch up on acronyms, what is MARAD?
It is one of the 3 agencies that fall underneath the U.S. Department of Transportation. It is Maritime Administration Department. Kind of like the FAA and those items.
The FAA for boats. Yeah, great. Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. Let's keep rolling.
Okay, the next item we have in front of you is the electrical substation. We have a request that you guys are going to see come up. It's a little bit larger than the 11.3. Basically, we have the port's decided on location to move the electrical substation out to the North Extension site. That move alone costs approximately 11.3 million for additional cabling and those items and trenching that has to go across through it. You have a change order request to the contract that will be in front of you for 20.68 million to bring the total contract value of approximately 49 million. And this will allow for the change in site location, integration of the battery energy storage system, which is in the port long-term planning, and continued design development. And I'll get into those details in the next couple slides. So the electrical substation that would be used to power the gantry cranes was originally located near the new Terminal 1, northeast of the admin building. As you can see there on the bottom left of the slides. The alternate site is on the new stabilized North Extension. We called a Port Advisory Board meeting on 12/30, where all but one member voted in favor of moving this, and that member has indicated that we're working through this and goal to have it resolved by the assembly meeting coming up. Couple of the advantages on this is more readily available space to allow for future expansion, including the T2 crane power, if that vendor ever decided to put ship-to-shore cranes on, and expand the BESS. As you guys see here, I think back in November, I've showed you guys this before. The light gray that's shown right here, the port is planning on applying for future DCIP grant funds and expanding this battery capacity out to 100 megawatts. Which would help establish continuity power throughout the entire port. And the north extension is out of the way from cargo operations, which is considered prime space. It does not compete with other uses, similar to what I talked about with the helipad. So moving this along, the cost increase is anticipated to be approximately 11.3 million. As you see in the highlighted yellow there, we have to do trenching. We're putting in precast forms so it can go in quicker. And the electrical duct bank, actually, what I was looking for, would be constructed to protect the crane cables going from the two locations. There's about a 3,400 foot distance increase there. Huh? Sorry.
Would you repeat that distance?
Yeah, the distance from the existing location to the new chosen location is about 3,400 feet. What we see in other ports across the United States, and all ports are different, but if you talk about like the Port of Long Beach and Seattle, those distances anywhere from 1,000 feet up to 5,000 feet. This fits within the range. And one of the vendors has expressed concern about the distance of that, and we're working through the challenges with them on that the next couple of weeks. So the battery energy storage system integration, the port's Defense Community Infrastructure Pilot Program, the DCIP grant, will purchase the substation batteries, replacing the need for the generator and load bank system that was originally contemplated in this. So it's a win-win. We will see a contract credit of approximately 1.4 million. This purchase represents the initial phase of the planned BESS, as I talked about, those two darkened ones, and then their future build out will be about 100 megawatts. Batteries perform better than a generator system. They'll provide backup power sufficient to park the cranes during primary power loss, and that's key. Right now, the way it's built is it will safe out the cranes. If that vendor is operating it and the power goes away, we can park the cranes and lower the loads. In the future, when we get the whole build out, it will allow for operations to continue. It captures regenerative power from the cranes, supports voltage stability during crane operations because they have high peak and peak demands. One of the key things on this is the batteries require more specialized equipment than a generator to operate correctly. There is a contract increase of roughly 5.8 million on that. Substation project is being constructed with a future BESS build out in mind, as I indicated on that graph, the light gray versus the dark gray. Any questions from the members on that slide?
Not on this slide, no. Continue, please.
This is just planned for future BESS. As I talked about, the port is planning to implement a microgrid system designed to both improve the Port of Alaska power system resilience to maintain port operation and readiness during local and grid power outages, as well as to flatten the power demand spikes, improve power quality, and reduce demand-related charges to provide economic value for port tenants. And that is in the future build out of the BESS. We anticipate future federal grant awards to help fund the remaining of the BESS projects. We plan to include a combination of controls, battery systems, grid generation, dispatchable energy generation, renewable power capacity to provide resilient, economic, lower carbon emissions power for the port cargo operations. And we continue to coordinate with JBER, CEA, U.S. Department of Energy, and the U.S. Department of Defense because that's where these DCIP grants come from. So here's the requested change order authority amount. The cost identified requiring change order authority is approximately 18.8 million. That includes the changes I mentioned earlier with the BESS, combining all these items, moving the 11.3 million out. I am requesting, once that's approved, the 10% change order for to deal with any future changes during construction, about 4.4. Currently, we have a change order authority limit of $2.5 million. So when you wrap it all up, the request additional authority increase is 20.68. Summary is the original contract value was 25.6 million. Existing change order, as I mentioned, was 2.5. Requested change order authority is 20.68 for a total not to exceed contract amount with change order authority of 48.89.
I think we have one more slide and then we'll get to questions.
We are working closely with the vendor that voted no during the PAB, coordination with Matson. As we indicated that they voted no due to the reliability of the further distance. The port is committed to delivering the power required for the Matson cranes. We continue to meet with them weekly on that and work through the finer details. One of the keys is the project is required to be operational on time for the T1 crane delivery in August 2028. Delays would impact the T1 construction schedule. And critical electrical equipment is required to be designed and ordered within weeks to meet the schedule. As you've heard me mention back in November, there's about a 100-week lead time on these transformers, which is almost 2 years. We think about it, and the key delivery date for us is August 15th of 2028 to make sure this is all operational. Any questions?
First in the queue, I have Member Brawley.
Yeah, just big picture. I know we've been briefed on the BESS before. I know it's critically important to have a power source if the grid goes down, at this facility. Do you anticipate that it would ever have capacity to essentially power outside of its own boundaries, or is it really being built just for the facility? Because I know there's a neighborhood near it. Obviously there's downtown, and I know we're not building it with the idea that it's a de facto power plant, but just curious if things get real bad, if it can contribute to outside of its own boundaries. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the future proofing for the electrical grid on the port is absolutely in play here. This is something that we're preparing for. And that's why the BESS system, with all the electrical engineering that I have heard and the experts, that BESS system is going to allow us to expand and offer a microgrid possibly for the port, and also be able to send power up to JBER eventually if JBER wants to connect to this power grid, and also send power back to Chugach Electric in downtimes with the energy that we've collected. So there are a bunch of avenues and different ways that we're pursuing right now to ensure that we've got flexibility for the future. And I think that's one of my biggest charges as the port director, is to modernize this port so that we've got some flexibility in the future. And I think this is one of the most important projects for that success.
Yeah, I'm great. I'm glad you guys are thinking about that.
Okay, thanks. Chair Baldwin Day, you had a question?
Yeah, I have several. I think my first question is about the dissenting member of the PAB and their concerns about power reliability. Can you flesh out a little bit more why distance potentially equals a less reliable system?
Through the chair, Member Baldwin Day, I'm going to do my best here and answer any additional questions you have. So if you look at this, let me pull up this map here so we can see the distance. If you see this white line along here that I'm showing, right? With electrical cables, you have to pull those into position. And usually you're limited by the number of bends that have to go through. And due to that, you have to install what's called junction boxes. And I think there's, off the top of my head right now, and we've committed to working with Matson to limit it, I think there's about 6 junction boxes between the new location and the existing location next to the admin building. And every time you make a connection, if you think about 2 pieces of cable coming together, the vendor's concern is that creates some reliability issues in providing power to the crane, because what happens if any one of those, so each one of those cables would, preliminary engineering, and we're trying to limit it so it could get less, each one of those cables is going to be about 500-600 feet in between each handhold. And the concern, my understanding is one of the concerns is that, what happens if that's a failure, if that cable fails? How do we replace it? What do we do, right? And that holds true no matter what we do in the system. If we keep it at the same location, you have about a 500-foot distance from the existing location near the admin building to the wharf. You still have to replace that cable, and it's all underground. But their concern is the multiple connection points of those 6 handholds where the two cables can connect and the reliability going across them and how quickly those can be replaced. But that's the same reliability concerns that you have. You still have a 500-foot piece of cable from the existing location to the wharf. And if you look back in the entire grid system, CEA provides one cable, and there's a lot more than 500 connection points between the power plant that CEA is providing the power from to the new substation. So we believe we can address all those reliability concerns that the vendor brought up. That was a dissenting vote on that, and we're working through that closely with them.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, there's a current concern about adding more opportunity for like single point failure to happen.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you. I think my follow-on question is, looking at the change order request. I'm aware that our funding mechanisms for the port are varied, and I'm curious how this change order impacts or doesn't impact other planned projects related to the modernization project.
Through the chair, Member Baldwin Day, couple items here, and let me know if I address your question fully. So this change order request right here is going to be paid from the state matching grants, right? And so that will be taken care of by the state matching grant. How this impacts future Port of Alaska projects, it's actually a win-win. And I'll get into that a little bit, is moving this substation out to this location here allows for the future growth of if the Terminal 2 vendor ever requires ship-to-shore cranes. Right now, they don't operate like that, but in 15 years, they plan. And the port is successful in delivering on that battery energy, additional storage. That allows future room and growth expansion to allow that T2 to happen without adding a complete whole new separate substation in a different location. If we keep the substation where it's located now and we have to expand it out, you're going to have more underground cables and potentially you're losing valuable land right there. The port leases that land where the substation is going right now. I don't believe they currently lease the north extension where it's going. From my knowledge, they don't lease that. So they're actually gaining some lease land back. Does that answer your question?
In part, I think I'm curious about whether some of the funds from this change order were theoretically earmarked for a different piece of the modernization project, and we're going to need to backfill in different ways. So yeah, and perhaps I'm thinking about this incorrectly. Considering sort of the total project cost as pie, and if you shift one piece of the pie, something else has to give. And maybe that paradigm's incorrect, and you can call me that. But yeah, I'm wondering, with a pretty substantial change, is there anything else that's going to be delayed or fall off the priority list, or will there be other impacts to other pieces of the modernization project?
Anytime the additional funds that are requested for this right here if you look at the whole pie as you'd explained, right? I think it will have some, this is challenging to answer. You will have, I look at it as like, it's an $800 million project for T1, right? This substation was 25 million, right? And now we're asking for back approximately 20 million more to deliver it, right? So that 20 million is kind of earmarked for the bonds and those items that go for T1. And then as we look to build out T2, moving in this location, there is potential cost savings because of the location of this substation, which I don't have ironed out yet because T2 isn't designed 100%, but the distance that if it would impact T2 in the way that if the distance from the substation to Terminal 2 will be shorter than what it is now. So there's a cost savings if we move the substation on T2. We're not seeing it on Terminal 1 now. So it's not, I don't have those numbers because T2 isn't completely designed yet. We're getting ready to kick that off. But the power, if there's ever needed power to Terminal 2, the substation distance is shorter. So it's not, I'm not sure if I answered your question.
If I might,
100%.
to the co-chair Baldwin Day, I think the very short answer is the money that we're going to use for this isn't specifically earmarked for something else, but this is an overall increase in the total project cost for now. But what we're saying is that we believe it could potentially lead to other decreases later, meaning that a portion of this overall increase we're seeing here could be offset by other savings. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. I recognize that, as engineering unfolds, we realize or recognize opportunities that we didn't know we had before. But yeah, just sort of wanting to keep tabs as we're seeing change orders come through, keep tabs on how this is actually affecting the overall project cost. And understanding that some of these funding sources that we are hoping for are not necessarily in the bag. It's just wanting to be aware fiscally of what we're up against. Thanks.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in right now. I did have a question I want to ask on this, but I also really do not want to shortchange our last presentation here because it's an important one, and they have been very thoughtful and respectful in asking that we allocate adequate time. So, my question to my colleagues in the room, as well as the folks here from SWS, does anyone object if we plan on going about 5 or 10 minutes over today to accommodate everyone? I'm not hearing any concerns. I just quickly, and hopefully this will wrap up this piece of the conversation. So we've been asked to act on this at the upcoming meeting, January 27th, and I understand why we're doing that when we look at the overall project timeline. You mentioned there's an effort underway to resolve some of the concerns with the dissenting vote from the PAB. What happens if we do not have a resolution by the 27th? Because I feel like that could put us in an uncomfortable position, right? Because say we need to make a decision now, we still have this concern that's been raised with it. I am not enough of an electrical engineer or subject matter expert to say that I will necessarily feel like I have all the answers. But when we have a flag, and that flag, if it's still outstanding, I mean, it makes me a little nervous, right? Because we could say, well, we're going to move ahead with this change order. We get a little bit further down the road, we find actually that concern was valid. Now we need to apply another $5 or $10 million or something to address it.
Member through the chair, Member Johnson, I'm getting used to how to do this correctly to the co-chair. I think that is really where we're at right now. We are working with the dissenting vote from the PAB, working diligently with them every week with electrical engineers to answer all questions. We've been in an incredible amount of meetings so far, feel very comfortable and very confident standing up in front of this body and saying the electrical engineers are producing real options and real electrical engineering solutions to these problems that are being brought forth. We just need to continue to work through them. And I think over the next couple of weeks, we feel like we're going to get a consensus to this. If we don't, I don't have that answer for you. I'll have to probably defer to Becky on that, but that's what we're doing each week to mitigate it.
To the chairs, I would second that our goal is to be able to reach consensus with the Matson team on a solution that satisfies their concerns before. Our goal had been today. We're still working through it. Our goal is to have it resolved before we come back to the assembly meeting by on the 23rd, 27th of January. To the extent that we aren't, we'll consider that question before that and see where we are. We'll talk with Matson about it, figure out how close we are. If we think that we need more time or we don't, we'll come back with a recommendation and we'll be able to address that. We'll plan to circulate something via email prior to that meeting, letting you all know where we are in that conversation before we come to that vote.
Okay, I appreciate that. I hope you're able to work through it. It feels like I'm just slightly nervous. We may find ourselves between a rock and a hard place here in 2 weeks. So good luck. I know it's not an easy thing. Yeah. All right. I don't see anything else in this. Thank you all again for being here. Let's go ahead and get the SWS Closure Fund Board up here. While we're getting ready, let me just ask, I assume there's a presentation that's going to go with this. Mr. Farina, do you know, has that presentation been posted online?
It is.
Okay, all right, great, thank you. Just checking. Let me ask too, while we're getting set up, is there anybody here who is going to want to engage in audience participation? I am not seeing anyone. Matt, can you help him with the presentation?
Okay, good afternoon. Kelly Toth, Director, Solid Waste Services. Thank you for offering some time for this presentation today. I have with me Angie Astle and Marks and Jeff Sins. They are public members of the Post-Closure Fund Board. And so to move forward, the purpose of the presentation, we're going to talk very quickly about an overview of the ARL fund and the post-closure care fund, as well as the investment performance and the 5-year update and long-term financial forecasting. This is the makeup of the board: Angie Estill, Jeff Sins, Ross Risvold, myself, and Chris Richardson as members. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Angie to continue the presentation.
You need to press the little button to turn this. There we go. Perfect. You might need to move just a little bit closer too.
Okay, all right.
Thanks.
Can you click for me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Angie Astle. I am a public member. I'm actually the Chief Financial Officer of Chugach, Alaska Corporation. So I want to thank the committee for allowing us time today and for extending their meeting. This is an important conversation, and we're really excited to share their presentation with you today. I also want to thank the board members, which you just saw the board members there. They're really dedicated and they spend a lot of time being very thoughtful on their role here. So I may not cover every single bullet, which you might be happy about, but please, if I miss a bullet that's really important to you, just ask. We're going to give you a little bit of a background, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, and who's going to really talk about the exciting things. So under accounting and regulatory rules, the landfill operators are required to accrue liabilities and fully fund the present value of the future closing and post-closing care costs of the Anchorage Regional Landfill. The full cost of operating the Anchorage Regional Landfill, including those costs, the closure and post-closure fund care costs, are funded through those user fees, and they have to be collected over the useful life of the landfill's useful life. In the board, the Municipal Assembly did amend the municipal code and formally established the Anchorage Regional Landfill Closure and Post-Closure Investment Fund and its governing board in December of 2016. The purpose of this fund is to accumulate the assets sufficient to cover the costs of the closing Anchorage Regional Landfill and to pay those required post-closure and closure monitoring and maintenance costs over a period of time. The board is responsible for ensuring that sufficient funds are set aside to pay these future closure and post-closure care costs. The board is responsible for strategic asset allocation, adopting and updating the investment policy statement, and ensuring the fund is managed on this long-term time horizon and to fulfill this anticipated closure and post-closure cost obligation. In 2020, the Assembly further amended the municipal code and created a concept that I've referred to, and I think Jeff has referred to, as generational equity. It's the concept that the current users of the Anchorage Regional Landfill, past and future, have to proportionately contribute to these post-closure care costs over the life of the landfill. To enable this, there was the creation of a long-term financial planning model. And that long-term financial planning model is critical to that generational prosperity and making sure that we are, that the long-term funding of this is being accommodated. In 2021, the Assembly, through the use of this long-term planning model, which was the first year, they authorized the transfer of $25 million of excess funding back out of the ARL closure and post-closure fund back to solid waste services. In essence, it was overfunded at that point in time when we implemented the model. So that was a high level, and we're going to dig a little deeper on a couple of the highlights here. So the EPA rules require the landfill operators have the sufficient funds to do those closure and post-closure costs, and that's a 30-year liability. So we have to have 30 years of those funds available after the landfill closes. Solid Waste Services does include in its annual budget this liability associated with those funds. And the concept of generational equity means that the Anchorage Regional Landfill pays a proportionate share of the closure and post-closure care costs to the Anchorage, to our fund on an annual basis. And those deposits are part of the long-term financial model that's developed. Withdrawals, so deposits occur on an annual basis, and they become part of the investment fund that we manage under the goal of the fund. Withdrawals from the fund are only for purposes for the ARL post-closure and closure care fund unless Assembly approves otherwise. I'm going to highlight a couple of things here. So a board is established to manage these investment fund activities, and we're really lucky to have Jeff Sins as one of the members of our board. He is a public volunteer member, such as myself, with an extensive background. He's the CFO and retired CFO and CIO of Bristol Bay Native Corporation, former CFO of the municipality, and a former finance director of the Solid Waste Services. So he has a deep understanding and is just a valuable board member. As I mentioned, I'm a chief financial officer of Chugach Alaska Corporation, so I have deep expertise in financial matters. And then we're balanced by Kelly and the finance staff. And so it's a really involved board, and we have a lot of in-depth conversations and really actively manage this fund. We also engage Callan as our independent investment advisor to invest and to advise us, and they work with us to update the IPS on an annual basis. And then we have, over the last few years in 2022 and 2023, we approved a shift in the fund's roughly 50% fixed income allocation from a passive core index strategy to a more active strategy, increasing the return of the fund. In addition, in 2025, we adopted a glide path approach to our investment. You might be familiar with this with your 401k. This glide path approach begins with a 60% target allocation to equities and a 40% to fixed income. And over the life of the landfill, as it matures down, it's expected to roll down at 5-year intervals, reducing the equity risk as we get closer and closer to that closure and post-closure care costs. I did talk about how the board's responsibilities, the annual deposit that is derived and paid to the fund on an annual basis from Solid Waste Services. Those deposit amounts are part of that long-term planning model, and it's refreshed on a 5-year basis to determine the annual contribution that happens from Solid Waste Services. We do submit a report to the Assembly at each year on an annual basis, and we will submit our next report before June 30. The last report was submitted on April 8th, 2025. I'm going to do a high-level overview of the investment returns and then turn it over to Jeff to talk about the update of the 5-year planning model. The annual investment returns as of December 31st, 2025, the market was good this year, and we had a 16.9% actual performance in 2025. The benchmark was 16.8%, so we had a 1% positive difference. In the period of the first long-term planning model, which is a 5-year period, from 2021 to 2025, our actual performance was 6.3%. The benchmark was 6.1%. We had a positive variance of 2.2%. The 5-year long-term planning model during that period of time was 5.5%. So we exceeded the return horizon that was in the long-term planning model for that period. And that's just a period of market volatility. That's just what the market did. And this is the nuance of a long-term model, which will be measured in 5-year term increments. There'll be differences over that period of time. Since inception, the fund has returned 6.9% and the benchmark was 7%. So really we're performing very close to benchmark. The next 5-year period, Callan, who is our independent investment advisor's capital market forecast is 6.7% on a go-forward basis. And so that's just food for thought as we go into the discussion of the next long-term planning model and that update. So if there's no questions for me, I will move it over to Jeff to talk about the update of the long-term planning model.
All right, before we pivot, I have a question from Member Brawley.
Yeah, so, and I appreciate the kind of retirement metaphor, and then the moving to equity position. So I'm gonna stick with that metaphor. So essentially, in the situation of a human being, obviously, our lives are finite, we are mortal, and so therefore, there's no consideration for after that, right? But in this case, we are planning for the closure, or in this metaphor, the death of that landfill. But also then we will also have a baby landfill that will be born, right? And so I'm just wondering, like, as we think about this closure, how does this relate to the idea that we would certainly have a landfill in the future, whether it's, this one, wherever it goes, because I'm wondering then, the equity position makes sense because we'll need the money, but then what happens as we start to plan for the next landfill, essentially? Like, how does it, if it's a rolling basis, what does that look like?
Through the chair, Member Brawley, that is part and parcel why we're looking at the waste to energy project, because we don't want to build another baby landfill. We want to transform the way we manage our trash. And so more to come on that answer.
So this really is financial planning, not assuming that the facility itself goes away. Okay, thanks.
Chair Baldwin Day.
For those of us who might not be familiar with what post-closure care actually means in real life, what are we actually talking about? And I can wrap my brain around the closure of something, but what does post-closure care of a landfill look like?
So co-chair Erin Baldwin Day, Member Baldwin Day, what happens if you could imagine, for example, Merrill Field is a historic landfill, and yet there are multiple investments and continuing monitoring that will occur. Landfills, oddly and interestingly enough, continue to generate methane landfill gases. After 10 years, they peak after the last bit of trash goes in. So it will continue to generate landfill gases and likely reduce and not produce leachate anymore. But there will be continued monitoring and operations that continue post-closure.
I have never thought about that before, and that's fascinating. Carry on, thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Jeff Sins, and I'm going to give hopefully a brief overview of the update to the solid waste long-term financial forecasting model, which Angie referred to as one of the sort of key revisions to the municipal code that took place in 2020. And at that time, and then as Angie referred to it, the first 5 years of the financial life of, or at least the 5-year period beginning in 2021 through December 31st of 2025 was defined and established through use of the model. The code provides explicitly that each 5 years, the key assumptions for the model are revisited and the model is updated, and then adjustments are made for the next 5-year incremental period. And this goes on through the life of the fund, which is a long, long time. And I'll touch on this in a second. But first of all, what is the model? It uses historical and data and projections from internal and external experts to project the present future value of the ARL, closure, post-closure care costs, and the proportionate amount of these costs attributable to past and future users of the ARL. And this is really a key because the code explicitly provides that users of the landfill are supposed to pay their proportionate share of those future costs. There's really two sort of key functions that or purposes associated with this. One is to project the amount to be collected from future users of the ARL and deposited annually into the closure and post-closure fund. And the second is to analyze the current status of the fund, essentially look at how we're actually doing relative to the projections that come from the model, and then make adjustments as necessary to keep things on track. The update process, the first update process, was completed during 2025, and it was actually completed in the second half of 2025, and it was a collaborative effort between solid waste management, members of the board, solid waste external consultant Raftellus, who was the firm that developed the model, and then it also involved the investment consultant for the fund, Callan. The board reviewed and approved updated version of the model at a special meeting for that purpose on October 24th. And then more recently, the board decided it made sense to adopt a board resolution which documented that update process and the key changes to model inputs and outputs, so that this would be available for future boards 5 years from now and beyond, and also available for other interested stakeholders, whether it be the administration or the assembly, in terms of any decisions that are implied by the update process. Just to touch on a few key changes to inputs for the model, Angie talked a little bit about the actual investment earnings rate for the last 5 years, and reported that it was 6.3% annually during that 5-year period. She also talked a little bit about some changes in the investment strategy that's being employed by the board, which are expected to add further to increases in future returns, and the 6.7% that our investment consultant projects for the next 5 years. So one of the changes that were made on inputs was to increase the investment earnings rate from 5.5% in the first version of the model to 6.5%. Second one was there's a unique inflation rate that is developed for landfill closure costs. And it doesn't tie to generic CPI figures, but it's unique to costs associated with operating the landfill. It's internally generated by the engineering group at Solid Waste. And it happens to be higher than what we would normally consider CPI. The assumed rate for the first 5 years of the model was 3.5%. That's been increased to 4.5% for the next 5-year period. What's key to note here is that the investment earnings rate and the inflation rate on future costs are linked. And what's really important is the spread between those two. It was a 2% spread in the original version of the model. And because both have been increased by the same amount, it continues to be a 2% spread for the next 5-year period. So higher numbers, but they will interact in the same way in terms of the expected results. The really big and important change is the landfill compaction rate. And this is a rate that an assumption that came from Solid Waste, and it's really a big deal. It changes lots of things, and in particular, it changes the remaining useful life of the landfill. 5 years ago, the projected closing date for the landfill, and I'm referring to ARL now, Anchorage Regional Landfill, was 2064. After this change, that's extended to 2105. So it's a 41-year extension in the remaining useful life of the landfill. And from 2006 forward, that's more than doubling the remaining life. So that's significant from many respects. In addition to that, the planning period that our board deals with, which includes the post-closure period, which is assumed based on regulatory standards to be a 30-year period, extends from 2094, which was the sort of terminal date for this whole fund as of 5 years ago, to a new date of 2135. So the life of this fund now extends to 109 years. So I would encourage you all to take these numbers with a grain of salt. They represent, and it's part of our responsibility as a board, is to make sure that they're rational, they're inclusive, and they represent the best estimates that are available at this point in time. And they are the best basis we have for making decisions about the current financial status of the fund and the amount that will need to be contributed from future users in order to ensure that after the landfill closes, there's enough money on hand to pay those costs, which will go on for at least another 30 years, which raises another interesting point. The 30 years is a regulatory requirement. But one of the things I think solid waste and the municipality is learning is those costs don't necessarily end after 30 years. So thankfully, there's a lot of time to consider this and potentially change the way the fund is operated to provide for a longer post-closure period and to make sure there's monies that will exist beyond that 30-year end date. So what are the key outputs that result from this update of the model, and recognizing that this change in the compaction rate and the extension of the useful life has a material impact on these numbers. The first one is the primary purpose and a requirement of the municipal code is that the update project the annual deposits from solid waste necessary for the next 5 years. And what this is intended to show is the top number for each year is what was projected for this particular year 5 years ago when the model was first established. The second number below that is the updated forecast based on the longer landfill life and that's resulting from the change in compaction rates. It represents about a 68% reduction in the annual contribution amount. And it's really a mathematically derived number that is just a function of a longer period of time and the positive, I tend to refer to it as an arbitrage. It's a positive spread relationship between the earnings rate of assets on hand and the inflation rate on those future costs. There's a net benefit each year that's derived from that. The longer that period, the lower the amount that has to be deposited at this time to support that future cost. The second area and the second purpose of the update is to look at the current funding status. And this really is looking at the amount that was deposited or contributed from past users of the ARL relative to their proportionate cost. And because this landfill life is extended as far as it is, and because of this positive spread between inflation and earnings, the amount on hand is greater than the amount that would have been indicated 5 years ago when it was a shorter remaining life. And this is really the key output here. Moving on to the next slide. I'm going to skip over that discussion in the interest of time. The model results indicate that there's approximately $8.6 million in excess funds existing as of approximately this point in time. And because of this, the board initiated an attribution analysis to determine how much of this is really excess to the needs of the fund versus how much of it is normally occurring variances associated with differences between minor assumptions. For example, the investment earnings rate is a long-term assumption. We hardly ever hit it exactly. So on a year-to-year basis, we're going to vary from that target. But in the long term, things will gradually move back towards that middle. So those sorts of assumptions, long-term assumptions measured over short-term periods, results in normally occurring and expected volatility. And we just monitor that to make sure things are generally on track. On the other hand, there's permanent variances that occasionally occur. They're not expected to occur, but in this particular instance, they did. This compaction rate change and the material impact it had on the useful life. We consider that to be a permanent variance. And in this particular case, 5.2 million of the 8.6 million is attributable to that permanent change. So there's really two positive financial benefits that derive from that change in the compaction rate and the extension of the life. One is a reduction in the future annual contributions from solid waste and ARL users. And the second is the identification of $5.2 million in excess current funds that are available for transfer out of the fund and use for other purposes. At this point, I think it's important to point out the board has no say in what that alternative might be and whether or not those funds should be transferred and for what purpose. Our role is simply to identify what is the amount that needs to be on hand to meet the future closure and post-closure costs. And our conclusion, as documented in the board resolution, which by the way is
In your packet.
yeah.
And I'm sorry,
will be in your
okay.
pocket,
Yeah.
in your
Right
packet.
here. It's in.
That documents the board's conclusions relative to that and our position that there is $5.2 million in excess funds on hand at this time. So happy to answer any questions and thank you for your patience and
Okay, I have two
listening to
people in the
that.
queue. I also want to just note that we're already 8 minutes past our 10-minute extension. So I really appreciate my colleagues' indulgence and anyone else who's tuned into this. So with that, I'm going to try and conclude things as quickly as possible. But Chair Baldwin-Day had a question then, Member Rivera.
Yeah, I think I'm curious just about other sort of hard numbers. Like how much is actually in the fund? How much do we think we actually need? What does that projection look like? Based on the changes that you've outlined, how will ratepayers experience the change in required annual deposit, if at all? And then does the board have any, or the director, have any suggestions or recommendations as to how the $5.2 million that is that permanent variance ought to be used or invested? So those are my questions. Tackle them in whatever order you would like.
So I'll answer the first one and then, so there's the latest numbers, there's about $26 million in the fund as of this point in time. And if the assembly, who is, by the way, any transfer out of the fund requires assembly approval. If the assembly determines to transfer that money for some other purpose, it would be 26 minus 5.2 approximately. So somewhere around 21 million that would remain in the fund. Now, the answer to your other questions, I would leave to solid waste.
Yes. What is our, so we have 26 million. What's the number that we want to get to at some future point?
Well, when the landfill closes, the balance of the fund is going to be in the neighborhood of 1.6 billion. Recognizing that we are talking about a point in time almost 80 years into the future and the magic of compounding and several other factors.
All right, Member Rivera.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this discussion has been very interesting, and I appreciate the board resolution that you all passed earlier this week. In the board resolution, as I was reviewing it, it does say in here This is page 2 of the resolution, or top paragraph. The board initially questioned the rationale for this change given and it goes on. So, so if this board of experts initially questioned the rationale, it certainly makes me sort of wonder what were some of those questions that were asked, and what made the board convinced that the assumptions and the change in the model were accurate. I don't know if we're going to necessarily have time to go do all of that today, but I am interested in learning that, because, I mean, essentially what it looks like we're doing, sort of using this model of generational equity, is we are basically saying another generation, right, is going to be paying into this. And so if we're asking another generation to pay into this, I just want to make sure that we're making the best choices possible. And then also had the same question as Member Baldwin Day, which is that 5.2 million, the code provision says has to be approved by the assembly. So would love to hear some ideas on that.
Member Rivera, through the chair, to answer your question, I would love to say, please come for a tour, because really the answer is, at a high level, a general answer is the way we operate the landfill has dramatically changed. Even the equipment that we use, the software that we use has all dramatically changed. So what we've done is for the good has actually arrived at this higher compaction rate. And for us, our commodity is airspace. So the more we can preserve that airspace, the better off we're going to be. And that's exactly what we did. So I would love to have, be able to take you all on a tour to be able to show you the amazing intricacies that go into. It's fascinating. I'm fascinated and excited about it every time I go out there. But there's some really cool things that are happening out there. And then secondly, that $5.2 million, to Member Brawley's comments before about what are we going to do after the fact. We are leading with the vision of moving towards this waste to energy project, because if and when this facility is built and becomes in operation, we will be transforming how we manage our trash. We will no longer have to bury it. We will no longer have to look for other places to put it, to bury it. We don't want to bury our trash anymore. We would much rather turn it into something resourceful and to be able to lengthen the life of the landfill in perpetuity, if that's even possible. But that's we want to transform that, and that is where that investment would go, would be to continue building and working on that project. And we would love to spend more time diving into that. But my invitation is always open, and I value your time if any of you and any one of the public too would like to come and we love having tours. So thank you.
That's a great tour. I'm going to allow Member Brawley to ask a question, then I think I'm going to insist that we wrap this up.
Yeah, it's actually a brief comment, but it seems relevant. I would say that certainly am open to discussion about what to do with that additional. So thank you for kind of signposting where you think it should go. Because I will also note that there is history in this community of raiding funds, for the lack of a better word. And so I would also say, from the fiscal conservative side, to make sure that we are not kind of being overly optimistic on whether we will need that money, because we know Building Safety Service Area Fund, right? There's a structural deficit in that fund. And I know there's a few other examples where we were overly optimistic, pulled money out, and it's real hard to put it back. And so I would say I'm definitely interested in where else we could be using that money. And also we should not prematurely assume that conditions won't change for the worse. So I'm glad that they've changed for the better in this situation. But just to say that, thanks.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being very patient with us today. And thank you for everyone who stuck around to present. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and say we are at last adjourned.